They said humans were the youngest species in the galaxy, naive, reckless, and woefully unprepared for the ancient powers that ruled the stars. They said we lacked the wisdom of the ethereal councils, the psychic might of the Vorthak Empire, and the technological supremacy of the Silicon Confederacy. What they didn't know was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our weapons, our ships, or our numbers. It was our stubborn refusal to leave things alone. When Captain Marcus Chun broke into that abandoned Vorthak research facility on the dead world of Kepler 442b, he expected to find salvageable technology, maybe some outdated weapons systems, perhaps even ancient star charts that could give humanity an edge in the ongoing galactic conflict. What he found instead would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, about the ancient races, and about why some doors should never be opened. Because sometimes the monsters of legend aren't monsters at all. Sometimes they're prisoners, and sometimes it takes a human to be foolish enough to set them free. Captain Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his brow as he cut through the final layer of the blast door. The plasma cutter hissed and sparked against the alien metal, sending cascades of molten droplets to the floor of the abandoned facility. 3 days of cutting, 3 days of wondering if this whole mission was worth the risk of being caught this deep in former Vorthak territory. The door groaned open with a sound like dying metal, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness beyond his helmet lights. The air that rushed out carried a strange, sweet scent that his suit's filters couldn't quite identify. Something organic but not unpleasant. Almost like flowers, if flowers could grow in the vacuum of space. Control, this is Chun. I'm inside the primary facility. Beginning sweep of the research levels. Static crackled in his earpiece before Lieutenant Sarah Martinez's voice cut through. Copy that, Captain. Remember, we've got maybe 6 hours before the next Vorthak patrol sweep. Whatever you're looking for in there, find it fast. Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see him. The abandoned research station on Kepler 442b had been dark for over 50 years, ever since the Vorthak Empire had mysteriously pulled out of this entire sector. Intelligence suggested they'd been working on something big here, something that had made even the psychically powerful Vorthak nervous enough to abandon a facility worth billions of credits. His boots echoed in the empty corridor as he made his way deeper into the station. The walls were covered in the flowing, organic script of the Vorthak language, symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in his peripheral vision. He'd never gotten used to that particular trait of Vorthak writing. It was designed to be read telepathically, making it nearly impossible for non-psychic species like humans to fully comprehend. The first few levels yielded nothing but empty laboratories and research stations, all stripped clean when the Vorthak evacuated. But Marcus had studied the facility schematics for months. He knew there were deeper levels that didn't appear on any standard blueprint, levels that the Vorthak had tried very hard to hide. It took him another hour to find the concealed elevator shaft. The entrance was hidden behind what appeared to be a solid wall, but Marcus had learned to look for the telltale energy signatures that indicated Vorthak phase-shifted materials. A few adjustments to his scanner's frequency, and the wall became translucent, revealing the shaft beyond. The elevator was long dead, but Marcus had come prepared. His rappelling gear would get him down the shaft, even if it meant a longer climb back up. As he descended into the depths of the facility, the walls began to change. The sterile metal and polymer construction of the upper levels gave way to something older, more organic. The walls here were covered in a black, crystalline substance that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. 20 meters down, 40, 60. The shaft seemed to go on forever, boring deep into the planet's crust. Marcus began to wonder if he'd made a mistake. His oxygen reserves were good for another 4 hours, but if this was just an old mine shaft or geothermal tap, he was wasting precious time. Then his boots touched solid ground. The chamber he found himself in defied explanation. It was vast, easily the size of a starship hangar, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadows beyond his lights. But it wasn't the size that made Marcus catch his breath. It was what occupied the center of the chamber. At first glance, it looked like a spacecraft. It had the sleek, predatory lines of a Vorthack heavy fighter, all curves and organic flowing metal. But as Marcus approached, his enhanced vision began to pick out details that didn't make sense. The surface wasn't metal at all, but something that looked almost like scales. And there were no engine ports, no weapon mounts, no any of the technological features that should mark it as a vehicle. Because it wasn't a vehicle at all. It was breathing. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. The massive form in the center of the chamber was definitely alive and definitely not Vorthack. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but easily 3 times the size of a human. What he'd taken for spacecraft hull was actually hide covered in scales that shifted color in the light, flowing from deep black to midnight blue to hints of silver. But it was the restraints that made Marcus's blood run cold. Chains. Massive, energy-wreathed chains that wrapped around the creature's limbs and torso, holding its spread eagle in the center of the chamber. The chains hummed with power, creating a field that seemed to drain the very light from the air around them. Whatever this creature was, the Vorthack had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it imprisoned. Marcus activated his suit's recording systems and began a slow circuit of the chamber, documenting everything he could see. The creature appeared to be unconscious, or perhaps in some kind of induced coma. Its breathing was slow and steady, but its face was peaceful, almost serene. And what a face it was! Despite the alien proportions and the scales that covered its skin, the face was unmistakably feminine. High cheekbones, full lips, a straight nose that wouldn't have looked out of place on a human woman. But the scales continued up her neck and across her face, creating patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Her hair was long and white, floating around her head as if she were underwater. It was beautiful and terrifying. Marcus found the control panel after another 10 minutes of searching. It was built into the wall of the chamber, covered in Vorthack script that his translator struggled to parse. Most of it was technical jargon related to containment protocols and power distribution. But one phrase kept repeating over and over again. Vashtar net Kurin. Vashtar net Kurin. His translator finally caught up. The last dragon. The last dragon. Dragon. The word sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Every species in the galaxy had legends about dragons, ancient beings of immense power who had once ruled the stars. But they were myths, stories told to children and featured in entertainment programs. They weren't real, except one was chained in front of him. Marcus spent another hour documenting the chamber, recording everything from multiple angles. The control systems, the energy readings, the containment field specifications. Whatever this creature was, the Vorthack had built an entire facility around keeping it imprisoned. The power requirements alone must have been staggering. But it was the final discovery that changed everything. Hidden in a subsidiary control panel, Marcus found what appeared to be a personal log. The Vorthack symbols were different here, more hastily written, as if whoever had made the entry had been in a hurry. His translator worked slowly through the text. Day 47 of Containment Protocol. The subject shows no signs of weakening. Project Starbreaker remains indefinitely postponed. The Council grows impatient, but they do not understand what we have here. This is not merely a weapon to be unleashed upon our enemies. This is a force of nature, a remnant of the old powers that shaped the galaxy before any of our species drew breath. The humans continue their expansion into the outer territories. Their ships are crude, their weapons primitive, their minds closed to the greater currents of the universe. They see only what is directly in front of them, never the deeper truths that govern reality. Perhaps that blindness is their strength. They do not fear what they do not understand, do not hesitate when wisdom would counsel caution. In their ignorance, they might succeed where we have failed. If the containment field ever fails, if she ever awakens, perhaps it is fitting that humanity should be the ones to face the consequences. After all, They're the ones foolish enough to believe that any chain can hold a dragon forever. Marcus read the entry 3 times before the implications truly sank in. The Vorthack hadn't abandoned this facility because of some failed experiment. They'd abandoned it because they were afraid. Afraid of what they'd captured, afraid of what might happen if it ever got free. And now a human had found it. Marcus looked at the creature again, this dragon woman suspended in energy chains that had held her for over 50 years. Her face was peaceful, but there was something about the way the light caught her features that suggested dreams, or perhaps nightmares. What was she dreaming about? What did a being that old and powerful think about during decades of imprisonment? The rational thing to do would be to document everything and leave. Report back to Fleet Command. Let the scientists and politicians decide what to do with this discovery. The creature had been contained for half a century. There was no immediate danger, no reason to do anything rash. But Marcus found himself walking back to the control panel. His hands moved without conscious thought, his eyes scanning the containment protocols. The system was incredibly complex, but human engineering had always excelled at one thing: taking apart what others had built. He told himself he was just trying to understand how the system worked. Just learning, just gathering intelligence. The fact that he was accessing the containment field controls was purely academic. He wasn't actually going to do anything. The main power coupling was relatively simple to identify. A single command pathway that controlled the primary energy flow to the restraint system. If something were to happen to that coupling, if it were to become damaged or accidentally disconnected, the entire containment field would collapse within seconds. Marcus stared at the control for a long time. His mission was to gather intelligence on Vorthack technology to find anything that might give humanity an edge in the ongoing conflict. What was more valuable than a living relic of the galaxy's ancient past? What could tell them more about their enemies than a being who had existed since before any of the current powers had risen to prominence? But that wasn't really why his hand was hovering over the control. The truth was simpler and more human than any strategic consideration. 50 years. This creature, this woman, had been chained here for 50 years. Alone. Unconscious. Trapped. Marcus had seen too many prisons in his life, too many beings held against their will by those with power. The Vorthack Empire was built on domination, on the subjugation of lesser species, and the exploitation of anything they deemed useful. They would have kept this dragon woman chained for centuries if necessary, studying her, learning from her, all while she remained unconscious and helpless. It was wrong. On a level deeper than strategy or politics or species loyalty, it was wrong. Marcus disconnected the power coupling. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The energy chains flickered and died, their humming ceasing so abruptly that the silence seemed deafening. The dragon woman's body began to fall, her limbs moving freely for the first time in decades. But she didn't hit the ground. Instead, she floated, her body rising gently until she was upright, her feet just touching the chamber floor. Her eyes opened. They were the color of starfire, blue-white, and brilliant, and they fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him step back. She took a breath, deeper than any breath Marcus had ever seen, as if she were drawing in not just air, but the essence of life itself. When she spoke, her voice was like music played on instruments made of crystal and starlight. Human. It wasn't a question. She knew what he was, even though they'd never met. Her head tilted slightly as she studied him, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that she was seeing not just his body, but his soul. You freed me. Marcus swallowed hard. His sidearm felt useless at his hip. If this creature decided to kill him, no human weapon was going to stop her. But he made his choice. He'd opened the cage, and now he had to face whatever came out. Yes, he said simply. The dragon woman smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. Then, you're either the bravest human who has ever lived, or the most foolish. Probably the latter, Marcus admitted. She laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing in harmony. I like you already. Brave little human. What is your name? Marcus Chun. Captain, Earth Defense Force. Earth. She spoke the word as if tasting it. I have heard of your world, Marcus Chun of Earth. The young species that builds with metal and fire, that reaches for the stars with stubborn determination. Your people have grown far since I was last awake. How long? Marcus asked. How long were you imprisoned? Time moves strangely in the deep sleep they forced upon me. But by your reckoning, perhaps a century, perhaps more. Her expression darkened, long enough for the taste of starlight to fade from my tongue. She moved then, and Marcus finally understood what the Vorthack had been afraid of. She didn't walk so much as flow, her movements containing a grace and power that spoke of vast potential barely held in check. She approached him slowly, as if she were afraid of frightening him. You know what I am, she said. Dragon, Marcus replied. The last dragon, according to the Vorthack records. The last. Her smile was sad now. Yes, I suppose I am. My people are gone, have been gone for millennia. I am Lyralii, daughter of the Starite dynasty, keeper of the ancient ways. She stopped just in front of him, so close he could see the way her scales caught and reflected the light from his suit. And now I am free, thanks to a human who chose kindness over wisdom. I don't know about kindness, Marcus said. I just couldn't leave you chained. Could not leave me chained. Lyralii repeated the words thoughtfully. Your species is young, Marcus Chun, but there's an old wisdom in those words. The Vorthack would never have freed me, nor would the Ethereals or any of the other powers who believe themselves wise. They would have seen only the danger, the threat to their carefully ordered universe. And aren't you dangerous? Marcus asked. Lyralii's smile returned, and this time it showed teeth like pearls. Oh, little human, I am death and fire and the ending of worlds. I am the storm that breaks mountains and the void that swallows stars. In my full power, I could unmake this entire system with a thought. Marcus felt his knees go weak. That's good to know. But Lyralii continued, her voice becoming gentle again. I am also honor and oath and the keeping of promises. You freed me when you could have left me to rot. You chose compassion over safety. That means something, Marcus Chun. That means you are under my protection now, you and yours. She raised one scaled hand, and Marcus saw power gathering around her fingers like controlled lightning. I, Lyralii of the Starite dynasty, do hereby swear by the light of ancient suns and the darkness between stars. No harm shall come to you or your species while I draw breath. This I pledge by my true name and the memory of my ancestors. The words seemed to echo in the chamber long after she'd spoken them, as if they'd been carved into the very fabric of reality. Marcus felt something shift in the air around them, a sense of weight and finality that spoke of binding oaths and cosmic significance. Was that necessary? Marcus asked. Among my people, a life debt is sacred. You gave me back my freedom. I give you my protection. Lyralii gestured to the chamber around them. But perhaps we should discuss the details of that protection somewhere else. This place reeks of Vorthack fear and old pain. Marcus nodded, suddenly, remembering where they were and how long he'd been down here. My ship is waiting on the surface. Can you fly? Oh, little human, you have no idea what you've awakened. Lyralii's form began to change, scales flowing like liquid as her body stretched and expanded. Wings unfurled from her back, vast membranous sails that seemed to contain entire galaxies in their depths. Her neck elongated, her limbs became more powerful, and suddenly, Marcus was standing next to a creature the size of a small spacecraft. A dragon. A real, honest-to-God dragon. Lyralii's voice came from the serpentine head that now loomed over him. Climb onto my back, Marcus Chun. Let us leave this tomb and see what your species has built while I slept. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, but when Lyralii struck the rock above them, it simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energies Marcus couldn't begin to understand. They shot upward through solid stone as if it were empty air, emerging into the pale sunlight of Kepler 442 B's day cycle. Marcus looked down and saw the Vorthack facility shrinking below them. In a matter of seconds, they were high enough to see the curve of the planet's horizon. And still Lyralii climbed higher. "There," she said, banking toward a distant gleam of metal. "Your ship." The UES Defiant hung in low orbit exactly where Marcus had left it, its crew no doubt wondering what had happened to their captain. He could only imagine what they'd think when he returned with a dragon. "Marcus," Lyralii said as they approached the ship, "there is something you should know, something the Vorthack never understood about my kind." "What's that?" "We do not forgive easily, and we have very, very long memories." Her voice carried a note of something that made the stars themselves seem to dim. "The Vorthack Empire held me prisoner for decades. They studied me like an insect, probed my mind, tried to unlock the secrets of my power for their own use. They believed themselves my masters." She turned her great head to look at him with one burning eye. "They were wrong. And when this war of yours is over, when the immediate threats to your species have been dealt with, I will remind them of that error." Marcus swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I am saying, little human, that your species has just gained a very powerful ally. And your enemies have just made a very dangerous mistake." As they approached the Defiant, Marcus could see the bridge crew scrambling to track their approach. He could only imagine the readings they were getting from Lyralii's energy signature. They were probably trying to decide whether to raise shields or prepare weapons. "UES Defiant, this is Captain Chun," he said into his comm, requesting permission to come aboard. "And you might want to clear the main hangar bay." "Captain," Lieutenant Martinez's voice crackled through the static. "Sir, we're reading massive energy signatures approaching your position. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than a heavy cruiser. It's not an enemy, Sarah. It's—" Marcus paused, trying to figure out how to explain. "It's our new ally." Lyralii's laughter filled the void around them, musical and wild and full of promise. "Oh, Marcus Chun, you have no idea what you've started. But I think I'm going to enjoy finding out what your people are truly capable of." As they descended toward the waiting ship, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. Not just for him, not just for his crew, but for the entire galaxy. He'd come looking for Vorthack technology and found something infinitely more valuable and infinitely more dangerous. He'd found hope. And, as any human could tell you, hope was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The silence on the bridge of the UES Defiant was deafening. Every member of the crew stood frozen at their stations, staring at the main view screen where a creature out of myth and legend perched gracefully in their cargo bay. Lyralii had reduced herself back to humanoid form once inside the ship, but her presence filled the space around her like barely contained starfire. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was the first to speak. "Captain, with all due respect, what the hell is that?" Marcus straightened his uniform and tried to look like bringing ancient draconic beings aboard human vessels was something he did every day. "That lieutenant is Lyralii. She's a dragon. And she's going to help us win this war." Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez, a man who'd seen fusion cores melt down and survived boarding actions by 3 different alien species, was staring at the view screen with his mouth hanging open. "Captain, my sensors are reading energy patterns I've never seen before. Her cellular structure it's like she's made of organized quantum fields. That shouldn't be possible. Welcome to first contact with a species that predates everything we thought we knew about the galaxy," Marcus replied. He turned to his communications officer. "Ensign Park, open a channel to the cargo bay." The view screen shifted to show Lyralii standing in the center of the cargo bay, her scaled features serene as she examined her surroundings. Her white hair floated around her as if she were underwater, and her starfire eyes seemed to look directly through the camera at each member of the bridge crew in turn. "Greetings, children of Earth," she said, her musical voice carrying clearly through the comm system. "I'm honored to be aboard your vessel. though I confess your technology is quaint. Marcus winced. She's been asleep for decades. Everything's going to seem primitive to her. Lyralii tilted her head, and Marcus could swear she was smiling slightly. I meant no offense, Marcus Chun. Your people build with determination rather than elegance. But there is strength in such construction. Your ship will serve our purposes well enough. Our purposes? Martinez stepped forward. Captain, we need to discuss this situation. In private. Marcus nodded. Lyralii, would you mind waiting in the cargo bay while I brief my crew? We'll need to make some arrangements for your accommodation. Of course. I shall meditate on recent events while you explain to your pack why you chose to free a creature of legend. Her smile became more pronounced. I suggest you emphasize the strategic advantages. Humans seem to respond well to practical reasoning. The comm channel closed, leaving the bridge crew staring at their captain. Marcus could feel the weight of their expectations, their confusion, and more than a little fear. He just introduced them to a being that could apparently unmake solar systems, and he needed to make them understand why that was actually a good thing. Conference room. All senior staff. Now, 10 minutes later, Marcus faced his department heads across the briefing table. Outside the viewport, the dead world of Kepler. 442b turned slowly beneath them, giving no hint of the momentous discovery that had just taken place on its surface. I know what you're all thinking, Marcus began. The captain has lost his mind and brought some kind of superweapon aboard without authorization. You're wondering if I've been compromised, if this is some kind of elaborate trap, if I've doomed us all to become test subjects in an alien experiment. The thought had crossed my mind, Martinez admitted. Sir, our standing orders are clear. Any contact with unknown alien species requires immediate reporting to Fleet Command. We're supposed to maintain observation distance and wait for specialists. And normally, I'd agree with you. But this isn't a normal situation. Marcus activated the briefing room's holographic display, showing the recordings he'd made in the underground chamber. What I found down there changes everything we thought we knew about galactic history. The footage played in silence, showing the vast chamber, the energy chains, the sleeping figure of Lyralii. When it reached the moment of her awakening, several crew members audibly gasped. Dragons, whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist. Actual dragons. I always thought the legends were just convergent evolution in storytelling, the way every species seems to have similar myths about powerful ancient beings. According to the Vorthack records, Marcus continued, she's the last of her kind. Her species once ruled significant portions of the galaxy before going extinct millennia ago. The Vorthack found her somehow and kept her imprisoned for over 50 years. Chief Rodriguez leaned forward. The energy readings I'm getting from her. Captain, I've never seen anything like them. Her biology operates on principles that our science can barely detect, let alone understand. If she's representative of her species' capabilities, then we've just gained an ally who could single-handedly turn the tide of this war. Marcus finished. Think about it. The Vorthack Empire has been expanding for centuries, conquering or destroying every species they encounter. Humanity is holding our own, but barely. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of systems to fall back to. Lieutenant Martinez crossed her arms. So, you're proposing we trust our entire species' survival to a creature we've known for less than an hour? A creature that, by your own account, could unmake this entire system with a thought? I'm proposing we trust a being who swore a binding oath to protect humanity, Marcus replied. I've read enough xenopsychology reports to know that oath-keeping varies dramatically between species. But I was there when she made that promise, Sarah. I felt it. Whatever mechanism her species uses for such things, that oath was real. Dr. Vasquez was studying her datapad, scrolling through the biological readings they'd taken during Lyralii's transformation. Captain, these readings support his assessment. When she made that oath, there were measurable changes in local space-time, quantum fluctuations that suggest some kind of reality-binding mechanism. Among her people, a promise like that might be literally impossible to break. Assuming she was telling the truth about her capabilities, Rodriguez added, "We only have her word that she can do what she claims." Marcus was about to respond when every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. Red lights flashed as the crew scrambled to their stations, and Martinez's comlink crackled with reports from the bridge. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, came the urgent voice of Ensign Park. Configuration matches Vorthack heavy cruisers. 6 ships bearing directly for our position. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. They've been discovered. All hands to battle stations, he ordered, rushing toward the bridge. How long until they're in weapons range? 12 minutes at current approach speed, Park reported as the senior staff took their positions. They're not bothering with standard hail frequencies. I think they know what we found down there. The main screen showed 6 sleek, organic-looking vessels bearing down on them. Vorthack ships were grown rather than built, their hulls forming smooth, predatory curves that could shift and adapt in combat. Each of the approaching cruisers was twice the size of the Defiant, and their combined firepower could reduce a human dreadnought to scrap in minutes. Options? Marcus asked. Not good, Martinez replied, checking her tactical display. Our engines are still warming up from orbital insertion. We can't outrun them, and there's no way we can fight 6 heavy cruisers. Then, perhaps, said a familiar musical voice, it is time you allowed me to repay my debt. Every head on the bridge turned toward the rear entrance, where Lyralii stood calmly observing the tactical situation. She'd somehow made her way from the cargo bay without triggering any security sensors, and her starfire eyes were fixed on the approaching enemy fleet. "Ma'am," Martinez said carefully, "you should return to the cargo bay. We'll be maneuvering aggressively, and it's not safe for civilians on the bridge during combat." Lyralii's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Little warrior, I appreciate your concern for my safety, but you misunderstand the situation." She moved to the center of the bridge, her movements flowing like liquid grace. "You're not about to protect me from the Vorthack. I am about to protect you from them." Lyralii, Marcus said, "You don't understand. Those are heavy cruisers, military-grade vessels with psychic warfare capabilities and reality distortion weapons. Even if you're as powerful as you claim, Marcus," her voice cut through his words like a blade made of starlight. "Do you know how long my people ruled the galaxy? 18 million years." She turned to face the main screen, where the Vorthack fleet was growing larger by the second. "We watched stars be born and die. We saw entire species evolve from primordial ooze to spaceflight and then fade into extinction while we were still young. We fought wars that reshaped the fundamental laws of physics and ended conflicts by rewriting the basic structure of matter itself." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of tactical alerts. "The Vorthack Empire," Lyralii continued, "has existed for perhaps 10,000 years. They are children playing with toys they don't understand, wielding power they never earned." Her form began to shift, scales rippling with contained energy. "And they made a very serious mistake when they decided to chain me. 8 minutes to weapons range," Park reported, his voice tight with tension. "Open all cargo bay doors," Lyralii ordered. "I will need room to maneuver." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then nodded to Rodriguez. "Do it, ma'am." Martinez tried one more time. "Those ships have enough firepower to glass a planet." "You can't possibly." Lyralii turned to look at her, and for just an instant, Martinez saw something in those starfire eyes that made her soul shiver. It was vast and ancient and utterly alien, a glimpse of intelligence that had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. "Little warrior," Lyralii said gently, "you have seen perhaps 30 solar cycles. You know war as your species fights it, with metal ships and explosive weapons and the crude manipulation of physical forces. But you have never seen war as my people fought it." Her smile returned, but it was no longer entirely friendly. Today, you will learn the difference. She began to change, her humanoid form stretching and expanding. Her wings unfurled, but instead of the membranous sails Marcus had seen before, they now seemed to be made of pure energy, crackling with power that hurt to look at directly. Her scales shifted color, flowing from midnight black to deep crimson to brilliant white, each transformation accompanied by waves of force that made the ship's hull creak ominously. "Dragon form aboard a human vessel," Rodriguez muttered. "The structural stress readings are going crazy." "She's not going to fight them from inside the ship," Marcus realized. "She's going outside." Indeed, Lyralii was moving toward the open cargo bay, her massive form somehow fitting through spaces that should have been too small. As she reached the threshold between ship and void, she paused and turned her great head back toward the bridge. "Watch carefully, children of Earth," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "Watch, and understand what it means to have a dragon as your ally." Then, she launched herself into space. The tactical display went insane. Every sensor array on the ship was detecting energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible. Lyralii's form, now easily the size of a heavy cruiser herself, blazed like a newborn star against the blackness of space. "Energy output readings are off the charts," Rodriguez reported, his voice filled with awe. "She's generating more power than our entire fusion plant." "How is that possible?" "Maybe," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "we've been thinking about this wrong. Maybe she's not generating power. Maybe she's channeling it, drawing it from somewhere else." On the screen, Lyralii spread her wings wide, and space itself seemed to ripple around her. She was beautiful and terrible, a creature of myth made real, and she was flying directly towards 6 ships that could have reduced Earth's entire fleet to debris. The Vorthack responded as Marcus had expected. All 6 cruisers opened fire simultaneously, their weapons lashing out with beams of coherent energy that could have vaporized a moon. But instead of striking their target, the beams seemed to bend around Lyralii, spiraling off into empty space as if she existed in a bubble where the normal laws of physics didn't apply. "Impossible," Martinez breathed. "Those are Mark 7 plasma cannons. Nothing can deflect that kind of concentrated energy." Lyralii's response was swift and devastating. She opened her mouth, and what emerged wasn't fire or plasma or any kind of energy weapon Marcus could recognize. It was pure force, a beam of white light that seemed to contain the concentrated fury of dying stars. The lead Vorthack cruiser simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased as if it had never been there at all. The other 5 ships scattered, their perfect formation breaking apart as they tried to avoid whatever weapon had just deleted their flagship. "Did she just—" Hart's voice trailed off. "Unmake it," Dr. Vasquez finished. "She didn't destroy that ship. She removed it from reality entirely." The Vorthack were regrouping, their remaining ships spreading out to present multiple targets. Marcus had fought them enough times to recognize their tactics. They were trying to surround Lyralii, to hit her from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a sound strategy against any normal opponent. But Lyralii wasn't normal. She folded space. There was no other way to describe what happened next. One moment she was in the center of the enemy formation, the next she was behind the rearmost cruiser. The laws of physics that said you couldn't travel faster than light, couldn't teleport from one location to another, clearly didn't apply to whatever power she was wielding. Her claws, each one the size of a fighter craft, raked across the Vorthack ship's hull. But instead of leaving gashes in the armor, her attack seemed to pass through the physical structure entirely, striking something deeper. The cruiser shuddered, its organic hull rippling as if in pain, and then it simply stopped, dead in space, all power gone, as if she'd reached into its very essence and switched it off. She's not fighting their ships, Marcus realized. She's fighting their souls. 2 down, 4 to go. The remaining Vorthack vessels were in full retreat now, trying to reach jump distance where they could escape back to hyperspace. But Lyralii wasn't going to let them go. She sang. The sound carried through the vacuum of space, transmitted not through air, but through the quantum field fluctuations that Dr. Vasquez had detected earlier. It was hauntingly beautiful, a melody that seemed to contain the music of the spheres, the fundamental harmonies that held the universe together. And it was utterly lethal. The fleeing cruisers began to slow, their hulls resonating with the dragon's song. The organic metal that made up their superstructures started to vibrate, faster and faster, until the molecular bonds themselves began to break apart. One by one, the ships came apart like flowers blooming in reverse, their component atoms scattering into space in perfectly symmetrical patterns. In less than 5 minutes, a Vorthack battle fleet that could have conquered a dozen human colonies had been reduced to cosmic dust. And Lyralii had barely exerted herself. She turned back toward the Defiant, her massive form gracefully navigating the debris field that had once been enemy warships. As she approached the cargo bay, she began to shrink back to humanoid proportions, her wings folding against her scale back. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence as she settled gently onto the cargo bay floor and walked back into the ship as if she'd just taken a casual stroll rather than single-handedly destroyed a fleet. Status report, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. All systems normal, Rodriguez replied, checking his instruments. No damage to the ship. The only energy signature showing is from her. He gestured weakly toward the cargo bay. A few minutes later, Lyralii appeared on the bridge again, her appearance completely normal except for the slight smile playing around her lips. She moved to stand beside Marcus's command chair, looking for all the world like a particularly exotic member of his crew. Well, she said conversationally, that was refreshing. I've forgotten how good it feels to stretch properly. Martinez was staring at her with something approaching religious awe. How did those ships? Were threatening my oath-bound allies, Lyralii finished. Among my people, such threats are dealt with swiftly and permanently. She turned to Marcus. I trust this demonstration was sufficient to prove my capabilities. Sufficient, Marcus managed. That's one way to put it. Dr. Vasquez was frantically taking readings with every instrument at her disposal. The physics involved in what we just witnessed. It's going to take our best scientists decades to even understand the basic principles. You're operating on levels of reality that we can barely detect, let alone manipulate. Your species will learn, Lyralii said confidently. Humans have a remarkable gift for understanding and adapting. Give them a few generations, and they'll be building their own reality-shaping technologies. Her expression became more serious. But first, we have more immediate concerns to address, such as, Marcus asked, such as the fact that this was not a random patrol. The Vorthack knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. Lyralii gestured toward the view screen, where the debris of the enemy fleet was slowly dispersing. They had been monitoring their containment facility, waiting for someone to discover what they left behind. Martinez frowned. You're saying this was a trap? I'm saying the Vorthack have been playing a much longer game than any of you realized. They didn't abandon this facility because they were afraid of me. They abandoned it because they wanted someone else to find me. Lyralii's starfire eyes were distant, as if she were seeing patterns invisible to human perception. The question is why? Park looked up from his communications console. Captain, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. They want an immediate status report on our mission. Marcus looked at Lyralii, then at his crew. The weight of the decision he'd made in that underground chamber was starting to sink in. He'd changed the course of human history with a single choice, and now he had to figure out how to explain that to his superiors. Tell Fleet Command that the mission was successful, he said finally. We've recovered significant intelligence on Vorthack capabilities and intentions. But we're also going to need to arrange for some very special briefings when we return. Special how? Martinez asked. Marcus smiled, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. How often do you think Fleet Command has been briefed by a living god? Lyralii laughed, the sound filling the bridge with warmth and light. Oh, Marcus Chun, I am far from a god. Gods are distant and uncaring. I am simply a dragon who remembers her debts. Her expression grew thoughtful. But you raise an interesting point. Your people are going to need time to adjust to the new reality of our alliance. Perhaps it would be wise to begin with smaller demonstrations of what we can accomplish together. What do you have in mind? Marcus asked. The Vorthak Empire spans dozens of systems, with countless billions of beings held under their psychic dominion. Many of those beings would prefer freedom if they could remember what freedom looked like. Lyralii moved to the navigation console, her scaled fingers dancing over the controls with surprising familiarity. There is a system here, only 3 jumps from our current position. The Vorthak are using it as a staging ground for their next major offensive against human space. Marcus leaned forward. You're suggesting we attack a Vorthak staging area? With 1 ship? I'm suggesting we give your fleet the opportunity to attack a Vorthak staging area that has suddenly found itself without proper defenses. Lyralii's smile was sharp and predatory. After all, it's amazing how vulnerable even the most fortified position becomes when its defenders are busy dealing with other problems. Martinez was already pulling up tactical data on the system Lyralii had indicated. Kepler 186. According to our intelligence, it's heavily fortified. Orbital weapons platforms, patrol fleets, the works. It would take our entire battle group to have a chance against it. Then, perhaps, Lyralii said, it's time your people learned what it's like to fight alongside a species that doesn't recognize the word impossible. She turned to Marcus, her ancient eyes filled with something that might have been anticipation. What do you say, Marcus Chun? Shall we go remind the galaxy why humans and dragons make such excellent allies? Marcus looked around his bridge, seeing the mixture of fear and excitement in his crew's faces. They were on the edge of something unprecedented, something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Set course for Kepler. 186, he ordered. Maximum speed. As the stars shifted on the view screen and the Defiant leaped into hyperspace, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing toward their destiny. Whether that destiny was glorious victory or spectacular destruction remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The first thing Admiral Sarah Hassan noticed when she stepped into the briefing room aboard the UES Yorktown was that the temperature had dropped by at least 10 degrees. The second thing she noticed was that reality seemed to be slightly bent around the figure seated at the far end of the conference table. Lyralii sat perfectly still, her scaled hands folded in front of her, but the space around her rippled like water disturbed by an invisible stone. The emergency session of Fleet Command had been called 12 hours after Captain Chen's report reached Earth, and every high-ranking officer in the sector had been scrambled to attend. Admiral Hassan had read Chen's initial report 3 times, watched the tactical recordings twice, and consulted with every xenobiologist and theoretical physicist on her staff. None of it had prepared her for the reality of sitting across from a being who could apparently rewrite the laws of physics on a whim. Admiral Hassan, Captain Chen said, rising from his chair beside Lyralii, may I present Lyralii of the Starite dynasty. Lyralii, this is Admiral Hassan, commanding officer of the 3rd Fleet. Lyralii inclined her head gracefully. Admiral, I am honored to meet the leader of such brave warriors. Your Captain Chun has told me much about humanity's struggle for survival. I find your species' determination admirable. Hassan had been preparing for this moment since receiving Chen's transmission, but hearing that musical voice in person still sent chills down her spine. Every instinct told her she was in the presence of something that could end her existence with less effort than she'd used to swat a fly. Ms. Lyralii, Hassan began carefully, we appreciate your assistance with Captain Chen's situation. However, I'm sure you understand that we need to discuss the implications of your presence here. Of course. Lyraliai's starfire eyes fixed on Hassan with uncomfortable intensity. You wish to know whether I am trustworthy, whether my offer of alliance is genuine, and, most importantly, whether I represent a threat to your species' continued existence. Hassan blinked. The creature's directness was surprising. Those are among our concerns, yes. Then, allow me to address them in order. Lyraliai rose from her chair, her movement fluid and graceful despite the way space seemed to distort around her. First, trustworthiness. Among my people, an oath sworn by true name and ancestral memory is literally unbreakable. The universe itself enforces such promises. I have sworn to protect humanity, and that protection will endure until the last star burns out. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, leaned forward. When you say literally unbreakable, what exactly does that mean? It means that if I were to attempt to harm any human, the fundamental forces that bind my existence would tear me apart at the quantum level. Lyraliai's smile was serene. It would be quite unpleasant and entirely fatal. Admiral Hassan exchanged glances with her senior staff. And your offer of alliance? What do you hope to gain from helping humanity? Freedom, Lyraliai replied without hesitation. For myself, and for every being currently held under Vorthak dominion. Your species possesses something that the other galactic powers lack, the ability to see injustice and choose to act against it, regardless of the personal cost. That's a rather romanticized view of humanity, Hassan said dryly. Is it? Captain Chun could have left me imprisoned. He could have taken readings of my containment system and departed with valuable intelligence. Instead, he chose to free a being he knew nothing about, simply because keeping me chained was wrong. Lyraliai gestured to Chun, who looked uncomfortable with the attention. That single act tells me more about your species' character than 1,000 diplomatic exchanges. General Morrison, the Marine commander, spoke up. And the question of threat assessment? We've seen the recordings of what you did to that Vorthak fleet. How do we know you won't decide humanity needs to be managed? Lyraliai's expression grew cold, and the temperature in the room dropped another 5 degrees. General, I have watched species rise and fall for 18 million years. I have seen the greatest civilizations the galaxy has ever known, witness their triumphs and their failures. I could conquer your species, yes. I could bend every human mind to my will, reshape your entire civilization according to my whims. And in doing so, I would become everything I've spent eons fighting against. I would become the very evil that my people once stood united against. The room fell silent. Hassan could hear the faint hum of the ship's life support systems, the distant vibration of the fusion reactors. But beneath it all was something else, a sense of vast presence that made her feel like an insect contemplating the ocean. Furthermore, Lyraliai continued, her voice becoming warmer, I genuinely like your species. You are young and crude and often foolish, but you possess a spark that I have not seen since my own people walked among the stars. You reach for the impossible and make it reality through sheer determination. You face extinction and choose to hope rather than despair. Dr. Carter was frantically taking notes. This is unprecedented. We're talking to a being who has personally witnessed the rise and fall of galactic civilizations, the historical knowledge alone. Which brings us to practical matters, Admiral Hassan interrupted. What exactly are you proposing? How would this alliance work in practice? Lyraliai returned to her seat, but Hassan noticed that the reality distortion didn't diminish. If anything, it seemed to be growing stronger. I propose we begin with a demonstration of what human ingenuity and draconic power can accomplish together. Captain Chun has identified a suitable target. Chun activated the briefing room's holographic display, showing the Kepler 186 system. The Vorthak are using this system as a staging area for their next offensive. According to our intelligence, They're massing enough ships to push through our defensive lines and strike directly at Earth. We know about Kepler 186, Hassan said grimly. We've been planning a preemptive strike, but the cost would be enormous. We'd lose half our fleet just getting through their outer defenses. Not with my assistance, Lyralii said confidently. The Vorthak have grown comfortable in their superiority. They have forgotten that there are powers in this universe far older and more terrible than their psychic abilities. General Morrison studied the tactical display. What are you suggesting? That you single-handedly take on their entire fleet? I'm suggesting that I provide a distraction while your forces strike at their true weakness. Lyralii gestured, and the holographic display shifted, showing the inner system where massive orbital platforms hung around the primary planet. Those platforms aren't just weapon systems. They're psychic amplifiers broadcasting the mental domination field that keeps the entire population of this system under Vorthak control. Dr. Carter gasped. You're talking about freeing an entire planetary population. How many beings are we talking about? Approximately 2 billion sentient creatures, Lyralii replied. Humans, Altarians, Ceridians, and at least 6 other species. All of them held in psychic bondage, forced to serve Vorthak interests against their will. Hassan felt her heart racing. And if we destroy those amplifiers, then 2 billion beings suddenly remember what freedom feels like. And they're likely to be quite upset with their former captors. Lyralii's smile was sharp as a blade. The Vorthak fleet will find itself dealing with a full-scale planetary revolt while simultaneously trying to defend against your attack. The implications were staggering. Hassan could see the possibilities unfolding in her mind, but also the risks. It's insane. We'd be starting a galactic war. Admiral, Lyralii said gently, the war has already started. The Vorthak have been systematically conquering or destroying every species they encounter for millennia. They simply haven't bothered to formally declare their intentions to you yet. Captain Shin leaned forward. She's right, Admiral. The intelligence we've gathered suggests the Vorthak see humanity as a minor obstacle to be removed. They're not interested in coexistence or diplomacy. They want us gone. And with my help, Lyralii added, you can ensure that it's the Vorthak Empire that gets removed instead. General Morrison was studying the tactical implications. Even if we could pull off this attack, we'd need perfect coordination. One mistake, and we lose everything. Then, it's fortunate that dragons excel at coordination, Lyralii said. I can communicate instantaneously across any distance, provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements, and ensure that your forces are exactly where they need to be at the precise moment they need to be there. Admiral Hassan stood up and began pacing around the table. The decision she was contemplating would either save humanity or doom it. There was no middle ground, no room for half measures. What about the other galactic powers? She asked. The ethereal councils, the Silicon Confederacy? How will they react to our alliance? The ethereals will be cautious but ultimately supportive. They value knowledge above all else, and they will be fascinated by the opportunity to study a living dragon. Lyralii's expression grew thoughtful. The Silicon Confederacy will see the strategic advantages immediately. They have no love for the Vorthak Empire's expansionist policies. And the others? Most will watch and wait. But some will remember the old stories, the legends of my people. They will remember that dragons do not make empty promises. Lyralii stood again, her form beginning to shift and expand. Perhaps it is time for another demonstration. Here, Hassan asked alarmed. On my ship, observe. Lyralii closed her eyes, and suddenly, every screen in the briefing room activated. But instead of showing ship status or tactical displays, they showed distant star systems, enemy fleet movements, diplomatic exchanges taking place light years away. This is the Vorthak Command Center on their homeworld, Lyralii said, her voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate in their bones. They are discussing the human problem, debating whether to accelerate their timetable for your species' elimination. The images shifted, showing massive fleets moving through hyperspace. These are their forward elements, already en route to human space. They will arrive in approximately 47 of your standard days. Hassan stared at the screens in amazement. How is this possible? These transmissions should be encrypted, shielded, impossible to intercept. The Vorthack rely on psychic encryption, believing that only another telepath could break their codes. But dragons do not perceive reality the same way as psychic species. Lyralii opened her eyes, and the screens returned to normal. To us, their thoughts are as clear as spoken words. Dr. Carter was practically vibrating with excitement. The intelligence capabilities alone are revolutionary. Real-time observation of enemy movements, unbreakable communication across any distance, the ability to coordinate fleet actions with perfect precision. This changes everything, General Morrison admitted. With this kind of intelligence advantage, we could revolutionize space warfare. Admiral Hassan stopped pacing and turned to face Lyralii directly. And in exchange for this assistance, you want what exactly? What does a being of your power need from humanity? Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her starfire eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was softer, tinged with an emotion that might have been loneliness. Companionship, she said simply. I have been alone for so very long. My people are gone, my civilization extinct. For 50 years, I dreamed in chains, reliving memories of time when the galaxy was young and full of wonder. She gestured toward the humans around the table. Your species reminds me of what my people were like when we first reached for the stars. Brave, curious, determined to make a mark on the universe despite their limitations. I see in humanity the spark that once drove dragons to achieve the impossible. Hassan felt something twist in her chest. For all her power, all her ancient wisdom, Lyralii was fundamentally alone in the universe. The last of her kind, trying to find meaning in a galaxy that had moved on without her. And if we refuse your alliance? Hassan asked quietly. Then I will grieve for what might have been and seek other allies in the fight against tyranny. The Vorthack Empire will fall eventually, with or without human assistance. But with your help, it could fall in such a way that freedom spreads across the galaxy like wildfire. Lyralii's smile returned. Besides, I rather suspect you won't refuse. Captain Chun has shown me that humans have difficulty turning their backs on those in need. Hassan looked around the table at her senior staff. She could see the mixture of fear and excitement in their faces, the awareness that they were standing at a crossroads that would determine the fate of their entire species. All right, she said finally. Let's say we agree to this alliance. What's the first step? We begin with Kepler 186, Lyralii replied. A joint operation to demonstrate what our species can accomplish together. Your fleet provides the tactical expertise and coordination. I provide the power and intelligence gathering. Captain Shin pulled up the tactical display again. We've been monitoring their patrol patterns for months. If we time it right, we can hit them during shift change when their defenses are at minimum strength. And I will ensure that their reinforcements are delayed, Lyralii added with a predatory smile. General Morrison leaned back in his chair. I've been fighting the Vorthack for 15 years. I've seen what they do to conquered populations, how they strip away everything that makes a species unique. If there's even a chance to stop them, then we have to take it, Hassan finished. Even if it means allying with a creature of legend. Dr. Carter was still taking notes furiously. The scientific implications alone justify the risk. We could learn more about the fundamental nature of reality from this alliance than we've discovered in centuries of research. Hassan turned to Lyralii. Very well. Humanity formally accepts your offer of alliance. But I want to understood that this is a partnership of equals. We won't be subordinates in our own liberation. Lyralii's laughter filled the briefing room, warm and musical. Admiral Hassan, if I wanted subordinates, I would have approached the Ethereal Councils or the Silicon Confederacy. I specifically chose to ally with humanity because you refuse to bow to power simply because it exists. She extended one scaled hand toward Hassan. Partners then, may our alliance bring freedom to the oppressed and terror to the oppressors. Hassan shook the offered hand, trying not to wince at the electric sensation that seemed to flow from Lyraliai's touch. Partners, God help us all. God. Lyraliai tilted her head curiously. An interesting concept. My people had a different understanding of divinity. We believed that the universe itself was conscious, and that consciousness expressed itself through beings who chose to protect rather than dominate. She looked around the table at the assembled humans. Perhaps we were right. Perhaps that's exactly what this alliance represents. As if on cue, Captain Chen's communication device chimed with an urgent message. He checked the display and paled. Admiral, we're receiving reports from our forward scouts. Vorthack fleet movements have accelerated. They're not waiting 47 days. The leading edge of their invasion force will reach the outer colonies in less than 2 weeks. The mood in the room shifted instantly. Academic discussions of alliance and philosophy became secondary to immediate tactical concerns. How many ships? Hassan demanded. First wave estimates suggest at least 300 heavy cruisers, plus support vessels. It's the largest fleet they've ever assembled. Hassan felt her mouth go dry. The entire human space navy numbered fewer than 1,000 ships, and most of those were patrol vessels and light cruisers. 300 Vorthack heavy cruisers could smash through their defenses like a sledgehammer through glass. Well, Lyraliai said calmly, it appears our timeline has been accelerated. No matter. Dragons have always performed best under pressure. She stood, her form beginning to shift and expand once again. Admiral Hassan, I suggest you begin mobilizing your fleet immediately. And perhaps you should warn your colonies to prepare for a rather spectacular battle. You think we could stop 300 heavy cruisers? General Morrison asked. Lyraliai's smile was radiant and terrible. General, I think we're about to remind the galaxy why ancient legends speak of dragons in whispers. The Vorthack Empire is about to learn the difference between commanding through fear and inspiring through hope. She turned to Captain Shun. Marcus, I believe it's time to return to your ship. We have a galaxy to liberate, and I find myself eager to begin. As the briefing broke up and the officers scattered to their various preparations, Admiral Hassan caught Captain Chen's arm. Chun, she said quietly, I hope you know what you've started. Marcus looked at Lyraliai, who was calmly discussing tactical possibilities with Dr. Carter, her alien beauty somehow more pronounced in the sterile military environment. Admiral, he said, I freed a prisoner. Everything else is just consequences. God help us all, Hassan repeated. But as she watched Lyraliai effortlessly bend space around herself to create a private conversation bubble with the xenobiologist, Hassan found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't need God's help after all. Maybe they had something better. They had a dragon. The space around Kepler. 186 had never seen anything like the fleet that emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 250 human vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble fighters, all coordinated by an intelligence that existed outside the normal constraints of physics and time. Lyraliai flew alongside the flagship UES Yorktown, her draconic form dwarfing even the massive ship beside her. Her scales had shifted to match the starfield around them, making her nearly invisible except for the occasional flicker of starfire from her eyes. Admiral Hassan watched through the bridge viewports as the dragon gracefully adjusted her position, maintaining perfect formation despite operating in a medium that should have been impossible for any biological creature to survive in. Tactical report, Hassan ordered, her eyes fixed on the main screen showing the Kepler 186 system. Vorthack fleet composition matches intelligence estimates, reported Commander Torres from the tactical station. 18 heavy cruisers, 47 frigates, and approximately 200 smaller vessels. They're maintaining standard orbital defense patterns around the primary planet. And the psychic amplifiers? 12 orbital platforms, just as Lyralii described. They're broadcasting on frequencies that should be scrambling every non-Vorthack mind in the system. But our mental shielding is holding. Hassan nodded. The mental shielding had been another gift from their draconic ally. Lyralii had spent 3 days working with human technicians to develop protection against Vorthack psychic manipulation. The resulting neural interface arrays were crude by Dragon standards, but they would keep the human fleet functioning even in the heart of enemy territory. Lyralii, report. Hassan set into the special communication array that connected her bridge to their alien ally. The dragon's voice filled the bridge, carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. I count 2.7 billion sentient beings in this system, Admiral. All but the Vorthack themselves are held in various degrees of mental bondage. The suffering is considerable. Hassan could hear the controlled anger in Lyralii's voice. During their journey to Kepler 186, the dragon had explained the true scope of Vorthack atrocities. They didn't just conquer other species. They stripped away their free will entirely, turning entire civilizations into biological machines existing only to serve their master's needs. Enemy reaction to our presence. Hassan asked. Confusion, followed by rage, followed by desperate attempts to contact their homeworld for reinforcements. There was amusement in Lyralii's tone. I have taken the liberty of ensuring their communications reach only empty space. Captain Shun, commanding the Defiant in the formation's forward elements, chimed in from his position. Vorthack fleet is moving to intercept. They're forming up in standard attack formation. Hassan studied the tactical display. The enemy was responding exactly as predicted, their arrogance leading them to assume that superior numbers would be enough to deal with any threat. They had no idea what they were about to face. All ships, this is Admiral Hassan. Remember, our objective is the orbital platforms, not the fleet. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we let our ally handle the heavy lifting. Across the human fleet, acknowledgments flooded the communication channels. Hassan had spent the last week drilling her forces on the attack plan, but she knew that no amount of training could truly prepare them for what was about to happen. Lyralii, Hassan said, "You're clear to begin the demonstration." With pleasure, Admiral. The dragon suddenly accelerated, her massive form streaking toward the Vorthack formation faster than any ship could match. Space seemed to bend around her as she moved, reality twisting to accommodate her passage. The enemy fleet opened fire when she was still millions of kilometers away, their weapons lashing out with coherent energy beams that could have melted asteroids. Every shot missed, not because Lyralii dodged them, but because the beams simply passed through the space where she had been, striking nothing but vacuum. She was somehow existing slightly outside normal space-time, close enough to affect the physical universe, but removed enough that physical attacks couldn't touch her. Impossible, breathed Commander Torres. She's phasing through their weapons' fire. No, Dr. Carter corrected from her position at the science station. She's moving through folded space. The weapons are hitting her position, but she's not actually there anymore. She's everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The Vorthack fleet began to panic as their target approached unharmed. Ships scattered from their perfect formation, tried to present multiple angles of attack. It was a logical response that would have worked against any normal opponent. Lyralii was not normal. She opened her mouth and sang. The sound carried across space through quantum field fluctuations, a melody that seemed to contain the fundamental harmonies of creation itself. But instead of the destructive song she had used against the patrol fleet, this was something different. Something that spoke not of ending, but of awakening. The effect on the orbital platforms was immediate and dramatic. The massive structures, each one the size of a small moon, began to resonate with the dragon's voice. Their psychic amplification arrays, designed to broadcast mental domination across an entire star system, suddenly found themselves broadcasting something else entirely. Freedom. The change was visible from space. The planet below, which had shown the uniform gray-green of Vorthak terraforming, suddenly exploded into color as 2 billion enslaved minds remembered who they were. Cities that had been identical blocks of utilitarian architecture began to shift and change as their inhabitants reclaimed their cultural identities. Art, music, and individual expression returned to a world that had been stripped of everything that made life worth living. "My God," Hassan whispered. "She's freeing them all." But the dragon wasn't finished. As the last of the psychic amplifiers fell silent, their domination fields permanently destroyed, Lyralii turned her attention to the Vorthak fleet itself. The enemy ships were trying to regroup, their commanders no doubt struggling to understand what had just happened to their carefully maintained control system. Lyralii folded space again, appearing in the center of their formation. But this time, she didn't attack. Instead, she simply existed, her presence warping reality around her in ways that made the Vorthak ship's organic hulls writhe in apparent discomfort. "Attention, servants of tyranny," she said, her voice somehow reaching every ship in the enemy fleet simultaneously. "You have committed crimes against the fundamental order of the universe. You have stolen the free will of entire species, reduced thinking beings to mere tools for your ambition." The Vorthak response was immediate and vicious. Every ship in their fleet opened fire simultaneously, pouring enough energy into Lyralii's position to sterilize a continent. But the dragon simply absorbed it all, her scales drinking in the destructive force and converting it into something else entirely. Light, pure, brilliant light that spoke of hope and defiance and the unquenchable spirit of free beings everywhere. The light washed over the Vorthak fleet, and where it touched, their ships began to change. The organic metal that formed their hulls started to crystallize, becoming beautiful but brittle structures that could no longer support the complex systems needed for interstellar travel. "You wanted to rule through fear," Lyralii continued, her voice now carrying the weight of 18 million years of accumulated wisdom. "But fear is temporary. It fades when beings remember their own strength. What I offer is permanent." She gestured with one massive claw, and the crystallized Vorthak ships simply stopped. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but transformed into something that was no longer capable of bringing pain to others. Their crews were alive, but powerless, trapped in vessels that had become as beautiful and fragile as flowers made of starlight. "The choice is yours," Lyralii said. "Learn to live without domination, or face the consequences of continuing your ancient crimes." Admiral Hassan Wache,